Alright, I'm finally in the home stretch. Mounted in those two caps, and now I'm not going to polish them all up because I don't want to lose the printing on there with the part number. Likewise, I'm not going to go nuts cleaning up all these. These tube shields are kind of made out of some cheapo pot metal, and it tends to look funky after a while, so be it. Plus, considering how the chassis is going to turn a brownish color in spite of the T9, and I never repainted the transformer, I think it all looks nicely, evenly patinaed and grungy. So that's that. Now, there should be caps over these trimmers. I think I got two of them. I don't have a complete set. So for now, I'll dig up what I can, and the rest will just stay uncovered. Which I guess leaves last thing, which is the power cord. This vinyl one I've been using is strictly just for me to get the set working. I want to put a more period correct one on there. So, got a few choices. One, here is an original that's in pretty decent shape. It's not frayed or anything, but it is kind of stiff. So I don't think I'll use that. But it's a good reference for what the old cloth covering looked like. Now I've got a couple reproduction types. This guy and this. And if I compare it to the original, this one is much closer. Got a very similar herringbone type tight weave to it, whereas this is a coarser kind of pattern. Both will work fine, but I'm going to go with this goldish color. Couldn't tell you where I got them. It's been a few years. I'm not sure. And as for the speaker wire, well, I did put in some new cloth covered stuff, and as memory serves, the original speaker wires were 3 separate wires, and they were taped together at several points. And the original was, see, green, white, and green and white stripes. So I use green and white and yellow to represent those 3. So I could wrap something around here at a few spots. One thing I've heard that works good to simulate this type of covering for multi-section wires is shoelaces. Or I could use this stuff. Again, not quite sure where I got it, but it's cloth covering modern wire, and there's 3 conductors in here. So, and I'll dig up a plug. I've got some reproductions, I think, left. Or I've got some originals I can use, something like this, and it's a bit cracked. Let's see, or this guy. Oh, nice and rusty. This guy. It doesn't look too bad. Dirty but not corroded. Although, well, I'm not sure I like the looks of that. What else we got? Alright, here's a modern reproduction. Probably be the safest way to go. Or these. I'm not too crazy about this type because there's just so little body to it that kind of easy to get shocked when you're trying to pull these out. Your fingers can slip over and hit the metal. Other wires can pull out because there's just, when you got one of these, you grab onto it like that, pulling it out. But these guys, kind of fiddly. Or this guy, that looks like it was stepped on or warped over time. I don't think so. Oh, and I do have one reproduction left of this type, so I am going to go with one of these 2 guys. Maybe I'll just flip a coin. I'm not sure what was originally on this. Kind of inclined to go with this. I just kind of think it looks nicer. As for the cabinet, I'm done spraying lacquer on it, but I have not rubbed it out. In general, it's a smooth enough finish, and I use semi-gloss, so it's not super shiny, so I can get away without rubbing it out at all. From a distance, it looks fine, but if you get up close or touch it, there are some areas like here where there was some overspray, whereas this side is nice and smooth, so I should really knock that down. But generally speaking, it came out quite nice, especially considering all the hassles I went through. If you go back and watch all the parts in the series, between the cabinet being smashed upon delivery and the fish eyes and all the fun I had along the way. So there is a speaker remounted inside. The original label still there, a little tattered, but it's nice that it's still more or less intact after all this time. Now, there is one other thing that's holding me up a bit, which is this. This goes over the opening for the dial, so if you look in the front, there's a big hole there. Well, that's not exactly how the dial goes. It has this that goes behind that, so you just get this little rectangular opening. Well, this is brass, and it's painted black, and the old paint was pretty chipped up and flaking off and whatever. So I lightly sanded it and sprayed on some fresh semi-gloss black enamel, and the paints didn't like each other too much, so I had sort of the enamel equivalent of fish eyes forming, where it got exposed onto the bare metal in some parts. I guess the solvents from the new enamel dissolved the old paint. So I sprayed some of the paint onto a little piece of plastic. I took a brush and dabbed it on and filled in the holes, and now I'm letting it dry. Now this paint takes a full 48 hours to cure before you can put on another coat. So I suppose I could elevate the temperature, put it in the oven for a while or something to speed it up, but regardless, I'm going to have to wait a while. So this is yet another reason why I often work on multiple projects at once, because you run into something like this, and now I have to wait 2 days just for this one stinking part so I can put this thing back together. But in the meantime, I can do a dry fit of everything. So, for example, the chassis mounts on these 4 holes down here, and I need to hunt around and see if I've got some suitable diameter and thickness rubber mounts. The chassis kind of floats on those, and I dig up 4 bolts that have the right thread pitch and length, and I'll hunt around for some knobs. They should all be black. I got 2 black and 2 brown. I can live with this for now, but it'd be nice to get a match set of black, so I'll see what I can come up with. As for the speaker wire, I did end up just leaving the 4 I had in there, and I took some heat shrink tubing and cut up some pieces and slid it over there at like 4-inch intervals and shrunk it down, so that's fine. The original was 3 separate wires anyways, and the reason I especially wanted to leave those in is that one of the wires goes all the way from down there where I tied a knot like they had originally, all the way up over to here. So like an extra foot or more inside. So I didn't want to take that nice 3 conductor cloth stuff I had and waste more than a foot of it just to go from here all the way over to here. Or yeah, I could have done an ugly splice down in there, but you know, I already wired it up. These wires are fine. Plus they do match the original color scheme more or less, so that's that. Here's the power cord. I went with this plug. Now the opening is pretty generous, so I put some heat shrink tubing and then wrapped some electrical tape around the wire to build up the diameter so it fits pretty snugly down in this area. So it's on there pretty solid. Now for the other end, I'll feed through here, and then I'm going to look up something online. Somebody left me a comment a while ago asking me if I knew what an underwriter's knot was, or underwriter's laboratory knot, or I think it's got a couple names. Well, yes, I am familiar with it, but not enough that I could do it by memory, but I certainly have seen it before. It's a way of securing a line cord through a chassis hole like this securely so that the wire won't fray or come apart. It's a better way to do it than just tying, like, I think they call it an overhand knot. Although this seems to be working okay as is, but That's the official old school way of doing it, so I will look it up. And I'll see about adding a fuse. I don't have one down there right now. I think there's some unused holes in the chassis, like here and here. Let's see about mounting a fuse holder, maybe. And as far as the T9, it's been another day now or two since I put it on, and discoloration got a little more pronounced, especially down in this area. But not enough that I'm really concerned about it. So, keep an eye on it for a while. If need be, I can take some paint thinner, wipe it off, do another round of navel jelly, and put some more back on. I have used it on a couple other pieces, though, in the meantime. Like this guy from that super nasty, rusty Admiral I show you guys. And this was horrible, crusted with rust in a lot of areas. I spent several days removing the rust, put the T9 on this. Looks great. No discoloration, or barely any, no rust coming back. So, I don't know, whatever it is, something about this chassis, especially in this area, that the brown color keeps coming back. But like over here, it didn't. And this corner still looks okay. But a little discoloration here and over in there, I don't know. But, if it's just going to stay like that, that's fine. A little discoloration, no big deal. As you can see overall, I didn't polish this whole thing up. I didn't repaint the transformer. I'm not going to clean these up. I want to keep the original labeling. So, overall, I think it still has a nice kind of vintagey look, but it's a lot cleaner and nicer than it was when I got it. I think I should mention that it is actually possible to polish these up and make them look nicer. Here's one from my Philco p10o10. I went over this with my Dremel tool and a buffing pad and some buffing compound. But it took a while, and this wasn't so difficult because it's just really a cylinder, whereas this has these recessed areas. I think these might have been plated originally. You can see traces of it in there. I don't know if these were just polished or if they were plated. But I'm not going to take the time and effort to polish these up. I got 3 in this radio, and I've got a bunch of other radios that use them, and there's a whole lot of tube shields to polish up. Alright, I did find 4 rubber chassis mounts, which I believe are the right diameter and size, so that's cool. Now, as far as mounting it into the cabinet goes, I recall mentioning in a video not too long ago that I was having a lot of trouble finding the right bolts that they used on these 30 era Philcos. Well, here's an original, and it fits pretty well into here. So they're not machine screws. It's not like this. This is just far too fine a thread. It's the right diameter, and I can get these. There's a modern version, but don't fit. But the head's right. It's the right type of bolt. It would look original. So I went to my local hardware store and asked them if they had anything that looked like this, and no, they don't. But did have some sheet metal screws, threaded all the way up, and the head's a bit different. But these do fit. Not perfectly. So I complained before in videos about modern hardware. I don't know if it's the tolerances, or maybe they're better now and they were worse then, or vice versa, or the processing they used to make these, but all my modern nuts and bolts all seem to have play in them, so this works. The threads, tighten this down, it'll work well enough, but a lot of play. So between the 1 or 2 original bolts I've got and some of these guys, I can get this thing secured in there. So the original, this collar would ride between the wood and up into this. So if I use this guy, the threads might, chafe a little bit, but so be it. If anybody knows a modern source for these, I'd love to hear about it. I looked around online, and nobody could come up with something. Some guys said, use these and just crank down on them and deform these threads and they'll fit. Or go with these guys and there's a little bit of wiggle and you don't get the nice smooth shoulder, you know, near the head. Now as for that underwriter's knot, there are loads of websites on the internet that describe it in far better detail than I ever could. So here's a brief look at a diagram that shows it. And here's one particular website. It's actually on vintage Singer sewing machines. The Vintage Singer Sewing Machine blog in particular, and they go through great detail, step by step, with nice clear photos. So there's how it should look when you're done, and they show you how to go through it. So I'm going to follow their directions. I'll try to remember to put a link to this website in my video, but if not, I just simply googled underwriter's knot, and this is one of the first sites I came across. The idea is that it's a strain relief. So as you tug on those wires, the knot will just bunch up against the opening in the chassis rather than rip the leads out of the whatever you have them tied to. In this case, it will be tie points on a big light block. Okay, there it is. It's actually quite easy to tie once you get the hang of it. Now this synthetic outer coating really likes to fray, and it's nylon or something like that, so I also slid some heat shrink tubing before I tie the knot so I can slide this up here and heat it up and keep that from fraying. Otherwise, I imagine you put some glue on there or something like that to keep it from falling off, you know, from continuing to unravel. Okay, here is the final power cord wiring. I cinched down that knot tight to right where I had split the two wires apart and slid back the outer insulation, and that's where the heat shrink tubing was shrunk down as well. So you can yank on this cord all you want, it's not going anywhere. All it does is make this knot a little tighter. And this will not only prevent the outer coating from shredding or fraying, but it also prevents it from chafing in that cabinet opening. So I then stripped down one of the wires and soldered it on here, and here's where I located that X2 type safety cap I put right across the AC line. There's also a safety cap inside here, but it goes from one side of the AC line to ground. Well, unless you get a true earth ground, that's really not doing much to filter out the noise, so I also added a cap right across both sides of the AC line. And there's where the fuse holder was installed, so I was able to use one of the holes that was already there, which I think might be where the wave trap is installed in later revisions. I think it's either here or maybe over there. And there's where the other wire goes. Put some heat shrink tubing over it. Keep this all nicely insulated because it gets a little close to this box. And then a little jumper wire from the other end over to here, so just need to pop a fuse in there. Oh, I think something like a 1 amp fuse will do just fine. Alright, it is finally all back together. Those modern chassis bolts worked well enough. The rubber cushions were just right. See, I'm still missing a couple of the caps for the trimmers. This one I guess didn't have one because the center shaft sticks out kind of far. Those are the only two that I had handy. Eventually I'll find one. Find caps for those two. I guess I could have trimmed the speaker wires down a little bit. I just have the excess kind of coiled around inside there. Otherwise, everything is just fine. As for the front, I did track down a couple black hex knobs. Actually, I just took them off of another radio. I like this one better, so the other radio is going to get the brown knobs for now. I could use a little bit of cleaning up. Got a little white paint splashed on here, but otherwise just fine. And yes, it does turn on. And there's how that dial looks with that escutcheon in place. Now, I'm not happy with that paint job, so one of these days I will pop that back out. I use semi-gloss, which is a little too shiny, I think. It just doesn't look that good. It should be really flat black. And the paint's a little bumpy, so I think I'll someday strip the whole thing down and repaint it. Also, the dial scale's a little warped, and at the far end it scrapes a little bit. Right there. But, nitpicking. And yeah, we got the slightly torn grill cloth, a little worn through there, and there's where it's kind of bad. Well, I think I will do is take a paintbrush and some brownish greenish paint and kind of dab it on here, so from a distance it won't be quite so obvious. And I actually uploaded this video last night, but as some of you discovered, it was being blocked in your country. That's because of a single copyright violation towards the end of the video, so I'm re-recording this last segment. Here is the radio all back together, powered up. It's sitting on top of my Dumont Clifton teleset. Let's give it one final listen. Found some public domain music, so hopefully YouTube won't have an issue with this. Hope you enjoyed this rather lengthy restoration series on a Philco 60MB from 1934.